Have you ever heard of a dinner that could change the future of an entire family? Boston in the fall carries a beauty that's hard to put into words. The crisp air, the faint scent of cinnamon apple pie drifting from street-side bakeries, and the sunset stretching across deep red rooftops. It all feels like a forgotten story being retold. At a quiet corner of Beacon Hill, one of the city's most elegant and expensive neighborhoods, stood a restaurant named the Glass Ivy. It had no neon signs, no flashy advertisements, yet the waiting list stretched well into the next month, simply because it was a place for people who never asked about prices. That evening, as guests stepped into the warm, golden light that bathed the room like honeyed wine, no one paid attention to the new waiter, a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair, his hands slightly trembling as he held a tray of wine. No one knew he was Grant Whitmore, founder of Whitmore Systems, a tech conglomerate, and a familiar face on the cover of Forbes magazine. And even more surprising, no one knew he wasn't there to dine. He came to do something no spreadsheet, stock chart, or algorithm had ever prepared him for: to test the man who was dating his daughter. Beneath the perfectly pressed waiter's uniform, Grant tried to conceal himself. He had spent a significant sum arranging this role. No assistants, no secretaries, just him and a reason no father's heart could ignore. Ella, his only daughter, was dating a man he simply couldn't understand. Miles Carter, a high school teacher with a modest income, living in a rented apartment with 3 other roommates. Ella had laughed when Grant asked about Miles's assets. "He has nothing but sincerity, Dad. And to me, that's enough." But to Grant, enough was a vague concept. In his world, trust always needed to be verified. And tonight, he wanted to see with his own eyes the thing Ella called selfless love. Not through reports, not through second-hand stories, but through a tray of wine, a folded napkin, and the eyes of a father. In Grant's hand now was a glass of Merlot, the very wine he himself had chosen for the restaurant's menu 3 years ago. But as he approached table 14, where Ella and Miles were seated, he didn't yet know that he, too, was about to be tested. Because sometimes, the one being tested is not just the young man, but the father, relearning how to believe. The napkin in Grant's hand trembled slightly, not because of the weight of the wine tray, but because of the moment he was about to face. The man he had silently wished to erase from his daughter's life. Table 14. By the large window, warm yellow light cast a glow on Ella's face, and she was smiling. The same smile Grant had seen when she learned to ride a bike, when she got accepted to college, when she gave her first speech at a student conference. But this time, it wasn't for him. It was for the man sitting across from her, Miles Carter. Grant took a deep breath and walked forward. "Would you like to try the House Merlot, sir?" he asked, trying to keep his voice even. Ella didn't look up. She just shook her head softly, eyes still fixed on Miles. "No, thank you," her voice barely above a whisper. But Miles looked up, and he saw him. His eyes didn't skim past like those of other guests. They held still, calm, and strangely polite, so much so that it made Grant slightly uneasy. "He's looking at me like I really am just a waiter," Grant thought. "Good. That means the act is working." Miles offered a courteous smile. "We're all good here." "Thank you." Grant turned away, feeling both relieved and strangely unsettled. Maybe he's just being polite, he told himself. Or maybe he actually knows how to behave. He stood a few feet away, pretending to wipe the counter, his eyes never leaving table 14. Ella tilted her head, asked something. Miles chuckled, nodded. They clinked glasses of plain water like two college kids fresh out of an economics lecture, deciding to be frugal, even on a date. No wine, no appetizers. "Is this a date or a dinner under $20 challenge?" Grant muttered under his breath, barely suppressing a smile. Then suddenly, his gaze froze. Miles pulled an old handkerchief from his breast pocket, gently wiped a drop of water from Ella's hand. No awkwardness, no performance, just a simple act of kindness. Ella didn't say a word, but her eyes softened. Her fingers gently wrapped around his, as if she were holding on to something more solid than any promise. Grant tightened his grip on the napkin in his hand. There was something in the way they looked at each other, something unfamiliar, not strange in a suspicious way. Strange because, what if he'd been wrong? But he didn't back away just yet. Because the father in him still needed to see one more thing. And he had no idea that the first undercurrent was already rising on this very night. The glass ivy was now at its most magical hour. Golden light warmed the surface of oak wood tables. Dim candle flames shimmered inside glass jars like lost stars. From the kitchen drifted the scent of melting butter and fresh vanilla, blending with the lingering notes of a piano, echoing softly from the stage. Ella and Miles were still talking, not loudly, not showy, just small exchanges, simple but filled with emotion. Behind the bar, Grant pretended to polish a glass for the 5th time. The glass was already spotless, as if it had never been used. His eyes remained fixed on them. Nothing suspicious so far. Maybe he's just a decent guy, Grant thought, then silently scolded himself. Am I starting to let my guard down? And then the restaurant door swung open. At that very moment, a gust of cold wind rushed in strong enough to blow a menu clean off the host's stand. A man walked in, tall, wearing a sleek black leather jacket, heavy boots, no smile on his face. Grant paused. The instincts honed from decades of closing multi-million-dollar deals whispered to him. This man didn't come to dine. He walked slowly past the tables, didn't speak to the host, didn't glance at the menu. His eyes scanned the room until they landed on table 14. Miles looked up, and his face changed. Behind the bar, Grant suddenly felt like a background character in a crime thriller witnessing a real-life twist unfold. If there were background music right now, this would be the part with the low, ominous cello. The man leaned down, whispered something into Miles's ear. No one else could hear it. But Miles's expression said enough. Whatever it wasn't something small. Ella frowned. What's going on? Miles tried to keep his voice steady, but it was clear he failed. Just an old acquaintance. I'll step outside for a minute and be right back. Grant now, like a retired spy suddenly called back into action, hurried past the kitchen counter, gestured for another server to take his place, then slipped down the hallway leading to the back door. The back door creaked open. A sharper gust of wind swept through the damp brick corridor. Grant weaved past industrial trash bins, his heartbeat oddly fast. In the darkness, just a few meters ahead, Miles was facing the man in the leather jacket under a flickering street lamp. No one saw Grant. No one knew he was listening. And right there, a door to the past creaked open. Grant's breath turned to mist in the cold, damp alley air. Under the fractured yellow glow of a crooked light bulb, the two men faced each other like opposite worlds. Miles is nervous, bookish, not blinking. The other man cold, broad-shouldered, hands still tucked in the pockets of his leather jacket, as if always ready to reach for something dangerous. Grant crouched behind a large trash bin. He held his breath, not out of fear, but because his father's instinct whispered, "This is not a game." Miles. "I told you I'm done." The man. "But the debt isn't." Miles. "I'm working. I'll pay." The man. "You seem to be living well. Romantic dinner. Pressed shirt. Maybe your girlfriend would like to know why her good guy used to be one of my most loyal clients." Grant frowned. Loyal client? Debt? He froze. "Miles, leave her out of this." The man smirked. "Think it over, Carter. Do you want love or a quiet life?" He turned away. The sound of his boots hitting the brick floor echoed dry, sharp. Grant watched him disappear around the corner, his mind looping a single question. What is Miles hiding from my daughter? Miles remained standing under the streetlight, back slightly hunched, fists clenched, head lowered as if trying to swallow his shame deep into his chest. And Grant unexpectedly saw the silhouette of a father in that posture. Only this father had no company, no power, no armor, only the weight on his shoulders. A public school teacher in debt. I should be relieved to have found his weakness. But why does my heart feel this heavy? Grant thought, eyes stinging in the cold. Back at the restaurant, he didn't head straight into the kitchen. He leaned against the steel back door, one hand pressed to the cold brick wall. For the first time in his life, he wasn't sure who was truly being tested, Miles or himself. The next morning, Boston, veiled in mist. The sun hadn't fully risen, but the glass ivy had already opened its doors, serving early-rising executives and insomniac writers. No more candlelight, no more piano notes, only the scent of freshly ground coffee, the steady hiss of the espresso machine, and a weight in Grant's chest that refused to lift. Once again, he put on the server's uniform white shirt, cream apron, and stepped into the restaurant as if last night had never happened. But this time, he wasn't there to spy. He was there to talk. Miles sat alone in the farthest corner of the cafe. The black coffee in front of him had gone half cold. He stared into it as if searching for the answer to an equation with no solution. Grant approached, a second cup in hand. No tray, no disguise. Mind another cup? Miles looked up, briefly surprised, then gave a faint smile. Still working here? From last night until now? That's dedication. If I told you I'd never served coffee in my life, would you believe me? Grant almost said aloud. But instead, he just smiled. He placed the cup on the table. No further questions, no small talk. Just sat down. Grant, you look like you've got a lot on your mind. Miles, sipping his coffee, eyes drifting off. Yeah, thinking about debt, family, and how to hide it all from the one person I love. Grant said nothing, didn't interrupt. He waited. Miles, I used to think if I just stayed silent, if I just kept pushing forward, everything would eventually work out. But last night I realized the cost of silence is that she may never know what I've sacrificed for this love. Miles, I borrowed money from Dex, the guy you saw last night, to pay tuition for my two younger siblings. Our parents died suddenly. No insurance, no savings. I'm the eldest. Everything fell on me when I was only 23. Grant, nodding slightly. You kept that from Ella? Miles, because she lives in a different world than I do. Safe, stable, whole. I didn't want to pull her into the darker parts of mine. Sitting across from him now was not a suspect. Not some poor boyfriend from the business pages Grant used to skim, but a man fighting to hold on to his dignity and to his love. Grant placed both hands on the table, looked him straight in the eye. "There's something I need to tell you. I'm not a waiter. I'm Grant Whitmore, Ella's father." Miles frozen. His expression shifted from doubt to shock to a deep flush of embarrassment. "So, everything last night was a test?" Grant nodded. "And I think I didn't do too badly," he said, attempting a light joke, but his voice was lower, heavier than usual. Miles lowered his gaze. His pride hit rock bottom. The silence that followed hung in the air like a song with no chorus. "Grant, but I didn't come just to test you. I came to help if you'll let me." Miles didn't answer right away, caught between pride and quiet desperation. Then, finally, he looked up, eyes clear, voice firm. "I'll do whatever it takes, if it means I can keep her." Grant nodded, slowly, and in his eyes, for the first time, there was something that looked a lot like trust. And for the first time in his entire business life, he realized he had made a decision not based on data, but on the heart. That afternoon, Boston was no longer breezy. The sky had turned gray. The air hung thick with the smell of rusted iron and engine oil. A black sedan rolled silently past rows of abandoned warehouses in South Boston, a place where even Uber drivers didn't linger long. Inside the car, Grant Whitmore was removing his watch, setting his phone on the passenger seat, and folding his blazer, neatly revealing a plain gray shirt. But his eyes were anything but plain. This wasn't a CEO on his way to a meeting. This was a father about to reclaim his daughter's peace. The old steel door groaned open with a long, echoing creak as Grant pushed through. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, illuminating 3 shadows standing in the center of the warehouse. Dex, the man in the leather jacket from the night before, and 2 thuggish-looking goons, tossing a lighter back and forth like a game. Dex looked up and smirked. "Dex, so you showed, let me guess. A lawyer? Company rep?" Grant, without stopping. "Not quite." Dex, "Then who the hell are you?" Grant straightened his back, looked him dead in the eye. "I'm Grant Whitmore." The air turned to ice. A silence dropped over the warehouse as if someone had just cut the power to the entire block. Dex froze for a second, then burst out laughing. "Whitmore? That uptight tech mogul? You're joking, right?" Grant didn't laugh, didn't raise an eyebrow. "I'm here to settle Miles Carter's debt." "How much?" Dex snapped his fingers. One of his men opened a file case and pulled out a crumpled, handwritten invoice. "Principal, 50 grand. Interest over 8 months, 150 total. Cash or immediate wire transfer." Grant quietly reached into the inside pocket of his shirt, pulled out a checkbook, wrote slowly, steadily. His hand did not tremble. He tore out the check and placed it on the rickety wooden table in the middle of the room. "Here, full amount." Dex picked it up, checked the signature. His eyes blinked just once, maybe for the first time in his life. He'd just been paid by someone whose name was on the side of a building. Dex, "Well, lucky day, I guess, but, you know, the world's a small place. Money runs out, but debts? They don't just disappear." Grant stepped closer, until there was only an arm's length between them. "Grant, take the money and disappear from Miles Carter's life and from my daughter's." Dex growled. "You threatening me?" Grant, voice steady, unwavering. "No, I'm warning you. And I've never made a promise I couldn't keep. I've taken down companies owned by men richer than you in 6 months or less. Believe me, I have the money, the lawyers, and the time to erase your name from any city I choose." Dex swallowed hard. His grip on the check tightened. The two goons behind him said nothing. Grant turned his back and walked out of the warehouse without a glance. No one stopped him. No one spoke. Sometimes silence is the clearest sign of who's really in control. Outside, the Boston wind had picked up again, but Grant no longer felt the cold. For the first time in weeks, he knew his daughter was loved, and she was safe. That evening, Ella's small apartment smelled faintly of lavender. In the kitchen, a pot of water simmered on the stove, but no one noticed. Ella stood by the window, folding a sweater. Miles sat at the edge of the sofa, hands resting on his knees. Silent, stiff. He didn't know where to begin. There was no right way to say the things you've spent your life trying never to say. "Miles, there's something I need to tell you." "Really?" Ella looked up. That sentence felt different, not like how he usually spoke. "Miles, I once borrowed money, a lot, from someone bad." Ella stopped what she was doing. She didn't interrupt. She just looked at him. "Miles," continuing, "when my parents died, my younger siblings weren't old enough to work. I did everything I could, even things I never thought I'd do. And after that, I got stuck." His voice tightened, not from shame, but from the fear of losing her. "Miles, I didn't tell you sooner because I was scared. I didn't want you to see the part of my life that isn't clean. I didn't want to drag you into a reality that was never meant for you." "Ella? And you thought hiding it would protect me from being hurt?" "Miles, no, I thought you'd leave." Silence, only the ticking of the clock, each second cutting like a blade. Ella stepped forward, slowly, stood right in front of him. He didn't dare look up. "Ella, do you know, I've never needed someone perfect." Miles raised his head. "Ella, I need someone real, someone brave enough to speak their fears, someone like you sitting right here." She sat down, reached out, held his hand. "Ella, you should have trusted me. But I know, people only hide things when they love so deeply. They're terrified to lose it." Miles nodded, and for the first time in months he felt lighter. It wasn't because the debt had been cleared. It was because the truth had been accepted. Ella let out a sigh, then teased softly, "Next time, just tell me sooner, okay? I'm not a fan of learning the truth from my dad dressed as a waiter." They both laughed. A real laugh. Light, but carrying the weight of two hearts that had just weathered a storm. Outside, Grant stood leaning against the railing, not knocking on the door. He'd been there since Miles started speaking. He didn't hear it all, but he saw Ella's eyes when she opened the window. Not the eyes of someone betrayed, but the eyes of a woman who knew exactly what she wanted. 2 weeks later, on the top floor of Whitmore Systems, a space usually reserved for C-level executives and strategic investors, today welcomed a guest wearing a light blue shirt and a tie that still sat a little crooked. Miles Carter stepped into the conference room, clearly uneasy. His hands were damp with sweat. He clutched a personal folder, even though Grant had told him not to bring anything at all. He'd walked into classrooms every day with the confidence of a teacher. But today, facing a room full of directors, the CTO, and the entire senior HR board, he felt like a tiny dot beneath a towering sky. The door opened. Grant walked in. No tie, no chairman's pin, Just a man, Ella's father, with a quiet smile and eyes that radiated calm. Grant. Everyone, I'd like you to meet Miles Carter. The executives exchanged glances, slightly surprised. Grant. He's not here because of an Ivy League transcript. Not because he built $1 million startup. And not because he knows anyone on the board. A brief pause. Grant stepped closer to Miles, placed a hand on his shoulder. Grant. He's here because he proved who he was when no one was watching. Because he chose to love, to protect, and to sacrifice, even when there was no guarantee he'd be forgiven. No one said a word. But the way the CTO nodded, the soft smile of a female director said everything. Everyone in the room understood. Very few people are personally introduced by Grant Whitmore at an executive meeting. Grant. Today, I'm inviting Miles to join our special leadership mentorship program to learn, to contribute, and to prepare for whatever path he chooses ahead. Miles was speechless. He didn't know if he deserved it yet, but he knew he would do everything he could to earn it. Not for the position, but for the trust. A few weeks later, at the Glass Ivy, the place where everything began. This time, no disguises, no secrets. Grant, Ella, and Miles sat at the same table, laughing, talking. In front of them, the same dessert from that night, the same Merlot, but the taste had changed. Because now, there was no bitterness of doubt, only the sweetness of trust. Miles, raising his glass, to family. Grant, nodding, to trust. Ella, to choosing love even when it's hard. Grant looked at Ella, and in his eyes, she was no longer the little girl who needed protection. She was a grown woman, someone who knew how to love the right person, and, more importantly, how to hold on to the right person. And the man sitting next to her, the one Grant had once doubted, tested, and tracked like a suspect, now sat there not because he had been accepted, but because he had earned the right to be loved and trusted. Sometimes, when we want to protect the ones we love, we try to shield them from every risk. But there are people who don't need protection. They just need to be trusted. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment below. Have you ever loved someone so deeply that you hid the darkest parts of yourself just to keep them close? Hit like, subscribe, and share. If you believe, true love doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be real.